Welcome to the Explainer. Sometimes a simple bowl of porridge can hold the key to a really radical new way of thinking about, well, everything: faith, prayer, even our future. Today we're diving into a source that does just that, and it challenges some of our most deeply held beliefs. So here's the game plan. We're going to start with a familiar Korean tradition, red beans on the winter solstice. But from there, we're going to pivot, and pivot hard, to a pretty sharp critique of prayer itself. Then, we'll look at the alternative being proposed, this so-called path of righteousness, and see how this philosophy reinterprets old customs. And it all leads up to this bold declaration of a new, human-centered age.
All right, so our journey into this really big idea starts in a surprisingly simple place. We're talking about a traditional Korean custom that actually serves as the launching point for this entire argument.
Okay, so in Korea, the winter solstice, or Dongji, has a very specific tradition that goes with it: eating red bean porridge. And for generations, the reason why you do this wasn't just about food, It was tied to a really deep-seated spiritual belief.
For centuries, the idea has been that the porridge's super vibrant red color is like a spiritual shield. It's supposed to literally scare away evil spirits and ghosts, basically protecting your home and family during the darkest time of the year.
But this is where our source takes a really sharp turn. It basically argues that this entire way of thinking, relying on spiritual fixes for our problems, is completely and totally outdated.
Wow, it doesn't get much more direct than that, does it? The source just completely reframes the act of prayer. It's not seen as an act of faith anymore, but as a sign of ignorance in our modern age of knowledge. This is a head-on challenge to one of the most fundamental human practices out there.
So the source groups all these practices together, praying to ancestors, gods, spirits, and calls them shamanistic. Essentially, the argument is that these are primitive tools from a time before we really understood how the world worked. They were survival tactics for an age of ignorance.
And here's the core of that argument. It's that prayer only treats the symptom, not the actual disease. It might make you feel better for a little while, but since it doesn't solve the underlying problem, you get trapped in this endless loop of suffering and then pleading for relief over and over again.
So, if begging for help isn't the answer, then what is? Well, the source offers a pretty clear, though definitely challenging, alternative path.
According to this viewpoint, misfortune isn't some random spiritual attack, and it's not just a case of bad luck. No, the responsibility is placed squarely on our own shoulders. It's seen as the direct, logical result of our own choices and actions.
And this is the crucial point. We are the architects of our own problems. The source claims that when we make poor judgments or we mismanage our relationships with other people, we are actively creating the very hardships we end up suffering from later on.
This visual just lays it out so clearly. On the left, you see that endless, frustrating loop, kind of like a hamster wheel of prayer and recurring hardship. But the path on the right, it's completely different. It's a straight line. It's all about preventing the problem from ever happening in the first place by using knowledge and taking the right actions.
Now, you might be thinking this philosophy just wants to throw out all tradition, but that's not exactly it. Instead, it suggests we should reinterpret these customs through a really modern, practical lens.
And the master key to this whole reinterpretation is a Korean concept called bangpyeon. It asks us to look at traditions not as some kind of mystical rituals, but as highly practical tools, skillful means, if you will, that our ancestors designed to solve very real, tangible problems.
And just look at how this works with the red bean porridge. The bangpyeon view says the goal was never about scaring away spirits. No, it was a practical health solution. The red beans were known to warm the body, and the sticky rice provides much-needed calories and energy to get through a harsh winter. That was the real, practical purpose.
This same practical logic is applied to ancestral rites. The source argues that, look, ghosts can't actually eat, so the purpose was never to feed the dead. The true skillful means was for the living. It was about creating an occasion for the family to get together, connect, and strengthen their bonds over a shared meal.
Okay, so all of these ideas, the critique of prayer, the path of righteousness, reinterpreting tradition, they're all building toward one final, really grand claim about the era that we are living in right now.
The source makes this remarkably specific claim that the year 2013 was a fundamental turning point for all of humanity.
This, allegedly, is the moment we left the age of ignorance, where praying was a necessary tool, and we entered a brand new era that's defined by human responsibility.
So the core idea here is that humanity has kinda graduated. We're no longer seen as children who need to beg some higher power for help. The new expectation is that we stand on our own 2 feet, using the tools of knowledge and reason that we now have at our fingertips.
And this new era comes with a new rule book. The source is absolutely emphatic about this. Old habits like begging and kneeling aren't just useless now, they're actually counterproductive. In this new age of knowledge, doing those things will get you a scolding from nature, not a reward. The only path forward is to arm ourselves with knowledge and act correctly, all on our own. So in the end, this whole perspective really forces us to ask a profound question. It challenges us to reconsider where our strength really comes from and what the true nature of our problems is. In an age that's literally defined by access to information, where should we be looking for answers? Up toward ancient prayers or within, to our own capacity for reason and right action?